It started as just another day in North America. News headlines were full of political bickering, tariff threats, and the usual Washington drama. But quietly, without much warning, Canada made a decision that will be remembered as one of the most decisive turning points in modern history. While Donald Trump was still firing shots in his tariff war, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was preparing a move that would flip decades of energy cooperation upside down. For 75 years, Canada's oil, gas, and power grids flowed south into the United States like a reliable heartbeat. Tankers carried crude to American refineries, pipelines pumped natural gas into U.S. homes, and hydroelectricity powered American border towns. The relationship was stable, predictable, and deeply woven into the economies of both nations. Washington depended on Ottawa as much as Ottawa depended on Washington, or at least, that's how it seemed. But in 2025, that trust was broken. For the first time since World War II, Canadian oil and liquefied natural gas are bypassing the US entirely, heading instead to China, Japan, and South Korea. Overnight, the energy map of North America was redrawn. This wasn't just about energy shipments, it was about breaking a century of dependence and dismantling America's ability to hold economic power over its northern neighbor. Before we get into the full breakdown, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. We're diving deep into the moves reshaping the world economy, and you won't want to miss our next report. From trusted partner to strategic competitor. To understand why this shift matters so much, you have to go back decades. Canada and the US have one of the largest and most integrated energy relationships in the world. By 2023, Canada was the single biggest foreign supplier of oil to the US, providing nearly 60% of America's crude oil imports. Natural gas pipelines from Alberta and British Columbia fed directly into U.S. states like Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, and Illinois. Energy wasn't just a commodity between these two countries, it was a foundation of their political and economic partnership. For years, Canadian oil had a captive market in the U.S. The infrastructure favored southbound exports, and American refineries were built to process Canadian heavy crude. This meant Ottawa often accepted lower prices for its oil, knowing it was still cheaper and safer to sell to the US than to ship halfway around the world. But that dependency came with a price. Whenever political disputes flared, over softwood lumber, steel tariffs, or trade agreements, Canada's energy sector felt the pressure. Washington's influence was always there, even if unspoken. For Prime Minister Mark Carney, that imbalance was unacceptable. And he was ready to change it. The infrastructure that made it possible. A move like this doesn't happen overnight. The seeds were planted years earlier with two massive infrastructure projects. First was the Trans Mountain Expansion Project, a $21.4 billion expansion that tripled the capacity of the existing pipeline running from Alberta's oil sands to the Port of Vancouver. Once completed, it allowed an additional 590,000 barrels per day to flow to the Pacific coast, where it could be loaded onto tankers bound for Asia. The second game-changer was the Kitimat LNG terminal in British Columbia. This $18 billion facility, backed by both Canadian and Asian investors, was designed to liquefy natural gas from British Columbia and Alberta and ship it directly to global markets. With a capacity to export 14 million tons of LNG per year, Kitimat is now one of the largest such facilities in North America. Together, these projects gave Canada something it never truly had before: direct access to Asia without going through the US. For decades, Washington assumed Canadian energy would always flow south because there was no real alternative. Now, that assumption is gone. Why Carney pulled the trigger now? So why now? The answer is a mix of politics, economics, and opportunity. Donald Trump's renewed trade war with Canada created the perfect storm. His administration slapped tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and even agricultural products, claiming it was about protecting U.S. industries. In response, Carney's government began quietly reorienting trade policy toward Asia. At the same time, Asian economies, especially China and Japan, were eager to lock in long-term energy contracts. With the global shift toward renewable energy slowly underway, many nations are racing to secure cleaner natural gas supplies as a bridge fuel away from coal. Canada, with its political stability and environmental regulations, became an attractive partner. Carney saw his moment. In less than 18 months, his government signed multi-decade supply deals worth hundreds of billions of dollars, guaranteeing that a massive share of Canadian oil and gas would be sent across the Pacific instead of across the border. The immediate impact on the U.S. economy. The first place the pain was felt: American refineries. Without the steady flow of discounted Canadian crude, they were forced to buy more oil from overseas. That meant higher shipping costs, longer delivery times, and greater exposure to volatile markets like the Middle East and West Africa. The Midwest was hit especially hard. States like Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio have refineries built specifically for Canadian heavy crude. Reconfiguring them to process lighter grades from other countries is expensive and time-consuming. Until that happens, these refineries will either pay more for the right oil or cut production. Natural gas shortages are another looming problem. In the northern U.S., Canadian gas has long been a lifeline during the coldest months. Now, with more of that supply being liquefied and shipped to Asia, American utilities will have to outbid foreign buyers to keep homes heated. That means higher winter heating bills for millions of families. Political fallout in Washington. In Washington, the reaction was a mix of disbelief and outrage. Lawmakers who had always assumed Canada would remain a junior partner in energy trade suddenly realized they had no leverage. Trump called the move economic treason and threatened retaliation, while others in Congress warned of a looming energy shock if Canada continued down this path. Behind closed doors, U.S. energy officials are scrambling to secure alternative supplies. Some are looking to increase imports from Mexico, others are eyeing deals with Brazil or even Venezuela, despite years of political hostility. But replacing Canada's supply is not as easy as it sounds. It's geographically close, politically stable, and had always been a friendly partner. Asia's big win. If there's one clear winner in this shift, it's Asia. China, Japan, and South Korea have secured decades of reliable energy from a source far less volatile than the Middle East. For Japan and South Korea, Canadian LNG is especially valuable. It offers energy security without the geopolitical risks of relying too heavily on Russian or Middle Eastern supplies. It also provides cleaner burning fuel to help meet their ambitious climate goals while supporting stable industrial output. For China, the deal is a masterstroke. By strengthening ties with Canada, Beijing has managed to both diversify its energy sources and drive a wedge between two of its most important rivals, America and its northern neighbor. In doing so, China gains a long-term supplier it can count on, builds leverage in future trade negotiations, and reduces its exposure to potential U.S. sanctions or naval blockades in the South China Sea. This move doesn't just meet China's immediate energy needs, it reshapes the regional power balance for decades to come. The end of energy dependence. What's happening right now is more than just an economic shift, it's a redefinition of what it means to be energy independent. For years, U.S. leaders bragged that America was the world's top oil producer and didn't need foreign energy. But the reality is that in a global market, no country is truly isolated from supply and price shocks. Losing Canadian energy doesn't leave the U.S. in the dark, but it does strip away a major cushion against volatility and forces the country to compete with other buyers on the open market. For Canada, the move marks the first time in modern history that it has completely freed itself from economic dependence on the U.S. in the energy sector. It's a bold gamble, but one that could pay off if Asian demand stays strong. By spreading its exports across multiple continents, Canada reduces its vulnerability to any single partner's political pressure, ensuring greater stability for its economy even in turbulent global conditions. The future of North American energy. The big question now is, what comes next? Will the U.S. try to repair its relationship with Canada, offering incentives to redirect some exports south? Or will it double down on energy nationalism, focusing on domestic production and new suppliers? One thing is clear, the era of easy, guaranteed Canadian energy is over. The U.S. will now have to compete for those barrels and cargoes just like everyone else. And for the first time in a century, Canada will be the one setting the terms. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, subscribe for more deep dives into global shifts that shape your future. Like this video, share it with friends, and drop a comment below. What do you think America should do now that Canada has flipped the energy game?